We are back here with the Curious Dimension podcast. And today we are welcoming back Karen Alexander. And a quick little intro for Karen. She's a leading voice in the crop circle research community for over 3 decades. Karen has co-authored numerous books and publications on the phenomenon, and she's been deeply involved documenting, analyzing, and archiving formations all around the world. And she does a fantastic job bridging the gap between scientific inquiry and the symbolic depth of these mysterious patterns. And I've been really looking forward to getting Karen back on. So this is going to be great. Karen, welcome back to the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me back, Matt.
Yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun. We've got a lot of photos we want to go through, and I'd like to just kind of dive right in to some of the older formations first, and then we could talk a little bit about some of the more recent ones that have been popping up here in just the past couple months. Let's pull up this one right here, because I think this is a great example. Can you see this formation?
Oh, yes. Yep.
Okay. So first of all, what is the type of field that this is in? Hey guys, if you've been watching this podcast for a while, then you already know. I'm absolutely fascinated by the crop circle phenomenon. It's one of those mysteries that keeps pulling me in deeper the more I explore it. That's why I'm really excited about a collaboration between shapesofwisdom.com and Curious Dimension podcast. Shapes of Wisdom is a sanctuary for seekers of ancient knowledge and sacred symbolism. They've curated an inspiring collection of sacred geometry and esoteric art that aligns beautifully with the themes we often explore here on Curious Dimension. On their website, shapesofwisdom.com, you'll find thousands of different crop circle designs. Yes, thousands. Available on posters, t-shirts, jewelry, even coloring books. Whether you're into meditative art, symbolic meaning, or just want to surround yourself with something a little otherworldly, it's an amazing resource. Shapes of Wisdom and Curious Dimension have come up with 4 different t-shirt designs that invite you to explore the unknown and wear your curiosity proudly. And as a special thank you to our listeners, you can get 15% off your Curious Dimension t-shirts and Shapes of Wisdom apparel clothing purchases by using the promo code Curious1 at checkout. That's CURIOUS1 at checkout. Plus, if you're into digital art or want access to some of the most stunning crop circle visuals, use promo code Curious2 for 40% off the crop circle collections and big picture digital files available through the Curious Dimension link on shapesofwisdom.com. I'll drop all the links and codes in the description below so you don't miss a thing. So if you're drawn to sacred geometry, ancient symbols, or just want to wear your curiosity, go check them out. Again, that's shapesofwisdom.com. Now let's dive back into today's episode.
Okay, so this is in oilseed rape, or what is known as canola in the States. So this is a crop that they use for sometimes for making fuels or various other fats from the seeds. It has these beautiful yellow flowers on that you can see in this particular crop circle. This one was from 1997, and it was at a place called Barbury Castle in Wiltshire, which has had many formations over the years. I think this one was about maybe 200 feet in diameter, something like that.
So one of the things I want to point out here, and correct me if I'm wrong, but in canola seed, or rape seed is what you call it, is that correct?
Yep, rape seed, yep.
It does have these delicate little flowers on it.
Yep.
All right, so I just want to bring this up because if somebody were to mechanically flatten this down, I've been told that those little yellow flowers come off quite easily. If you're walking down the tram lines, they come right off on your clothes. Is that correct?
That is correct, yeah. Yep.
And so what we see here is that the plants have been laid down, but the yellow flowers are still pretty much all on the laid down stalks, right?
That's right, yep. Absolutely correct. Yep.
All right. So obviously, you know where I'm going with this. This is strange, right? Because you have this formation that's here in the field, and then you have the plants that have been laid down in some exotic way. And so did you actually go in this one?
I don't think I actually went in this one, but I have been in many canola crop circles over the years. Yeah.
And when you go in something like that versus something like corn or wheat that doesn't have these delicate flowers, and you walk upon this, what is your immediate sort of sense in this? Because I'm sure you're walking down the tram lines and you're covered in the flowers to begin with.
Yeah, and it's actually very hard to get out once it's in your clothes. Yeah, the first thing that you realize when you go in is that from the first step that you take till the last step you take when you leave, that you're actually creating further damage yourself, which is quite an uncomfortable feeling because obviously as you walk, your weight is crushing the plants underneath. Canola is a strange kind of a plant. I'm not sure about this, but I think it's sort of part of the cabbage family, and the stalks are quite thick in some of the plants. And certainly back when this formation was made, the crops would have been very tall. They can grow to over 5 feet tall. Not so much these days because they've modified the crops so that you get as good a yield but on a shorter stem. But yeah, your first sense is always in these is that you're creating more damage and that you're crushing the plants and the flowers beneath your feet. And with a formation like this, most of the damage would come from visitors walking around inside it rather than the creation of the crop circle itself.
Yeah, that is just that's just mind blowing. And it's one of those things about the phenomenon that you look at and you have to scratch your head and say, what's
Yeah.
going on here? Clearly, there's some sort of sophisticated method is being deployed to create the patterns. That's not clearly if you had rollers out there, you had ropes and boards, the flowers would just be scraped off the plants. And furthermore,
Yeah,
you
and
probably see.
you'd see a lot of crushing and scraping and those sorts of things. Obviously, if you're visiting a circle like this and it's had a lot of visitors, then that's you're going to see damage from them as well. So yeah, everything that you do, as soon as you're inside there, you are actually just creating more damage. And canola is not the only crop that's like this. We've had crop circles in plants like linseed or borage. And again, all those would have flowers on them. Sometimes I've been in circles. I went in a canola circle back in, I think, 1995. And when I walked in that, all the plants were laid down beautifully. But we found standing, I think they were barley plants, but quite immature barley plants. They were just shooting up. And they had not been affected at all by whatever had happened to the crop in the rest of the crop circle. It seemed that only the canola had been affected, not anything else. And I've seen that with wild plants as well. And sometimes I've been in circles where, that there have been wildflowers and things, and they have not been affected either by whatever is, whatever the creation process is, they remain unaffected. So that's always interesting to see as well. It is almost sometimes as though you think to yourself, this must be crop specific because it's not affected different plants within in the field where this
Yeah,
circle has happened. Yeah.
so you're saying that like in a field where there was more than one type of crop, only the rapeseed was flattened or
Yeah.
laid
Yeah.
down.
Yeah, because sometimes you see, if obviously the farmers rotate the crops, so they don't grow the same crop in the same field every year. They'll rotate them around, and sometimes you can go in a crop field and you will see that there will be germinated seeds from what was last year's crop, which is what I was seeing in this one that I'm particularly talking about. So the barley, the residual seeds of barley had sprouted in the field, but they had not been affected by whatever happened to that crop in that field.
That is crazy. This stuff still just blows my mind. There's another one I wanted to bring up. Let me just pull it up. There's one where it looks like there's an eclipse happening. Can you see this one here?
Yes, I can see it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. And this one was right back at the beginning of 1999. And yes, and that was the year that there was a solar eclipse in the UK that summer. It's really interesting because some crop circles have had either symbolism to do with celestial events, let's just call them that. There was one that seemed to show a transit of Venus across the face of the sun, which was gorgeous as well. And also sometimes the symbolism on the ground is matched by the alignment of the stars in the sky. I can think of one or two, particularly in the last couple of years, where that's been the case. So yeah, there does seem to be a connection sometimes to the cosmic, as well as obviously the more well-known connection to the ancient landscape.
Yeah. And one of
Yeah.
the ones I wanted to bring up about the celestial connection was the Shoemaker-Levy comet. I talked about this with Barbara Lamb about a
Yeah,
month ago,
yeah.
and I know she talks about that extensively. But one thing I didn't understand, and I think I maybe I have it now, is that there may have been, I think, was there a series of Shoemaker Levy related crop circles that came up? Can you see this
Yep.
one?
Yes, I
So
can. Yep.
the one I showed with Barbara was a more complete one. I think it showed a bunch of circles that had the complete, almost like all the fragments of the Shoemaker Levy comet.
Yep.
And then,
Yep.
is it true as the summer went on, you had similar formations, but then
Yep.
the circles were
Yeah.
decreasing? Is that correct?
That's correct. So this would be 1994, and the ones that you're showing here were at a place called East Dean in Sussex. But yes, 1994 was the year of, they were known as the thought bubbles because that's what they looked like. But yes, and they could also be interpreted as comets or whatever. In fact, I remember seeing some of the Shoemaker Levy comets while it was happening. We were having a crop circle get together down in Cornwall, and we actually had a telescope set up so we could watch it happening.
Wow. And so I don't know who gets credited with kind of making that association, but I'm sure that didn't happen right away because the first one that showed up looked insectoid with a bunch of circles behind it. So at
Yeah,
what
yeah,
point did
yeah.
you guys
So
start to make that connection?
I think actually it was one of the Sussex researchers whose name escapes me now. This is so bad. I can't remember his name now, so I do apologize. But he was particularly interested in the connection between crop circles and what was going on in the sky. And as I say, I don't think maybe until this point we hadn't really thought about it because 1994 is still quite early on in the sort of the modern day crop circle phenomenon. But I know there was a guy whose name really does escape me who had written several articles looking at how what was occurring on the ground had some kind of relationship with what was going on in the sky. I think in 1994 as well, there were some other formations that had almost like starfield patterns in them. There was one at, I think, at a place called West Stole in Wiltshire, which looked like a spiral galaxy and then had standing tufts or tiny circles and rings inside of it. And I think this particular researcher had looked at that and how you could marry it up with what was going on in the sky at the time. So yeah, it is very fascinating, the relationship between the
Yeah,
two.
that's when I saw Barbara talking about that, I was like, oh, and then I had heard of Shoemaker Levy and went
Yeah,
back and looked at all this. I was like, oh, I was like, whatever's going on here is mimicking the progression of the Shoemaker Levy comet that smacked into Jupiter back then. And it was
yeah,
tracking it almost in real time, it looked like. And
yeah,
so I thought that was really interesting, to say the least. This is
yeah.
sometimes I've been looking at this too long, I think, and you probably are guilty of this too. Like you're looking at this so long and you're just talking about it nonchalantly, but then you think to yourself, oh my God, what the heck is this? This is utterly mind blowing. And I go back to this all the time. I think the whatever this is, it's just so big, it's so hard to comprehend that I think one of the main themes is maybe just supposed to get you thinking and get you energized and considering things that get you out of your old way of thinking, maybe is the way to put it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And all the different connections that the phenomenon makes to lots of different things. The sky is just one of them, ancient sites is another one, but there are other things that it makes connections to as well. And all of those things, I think, are designed to really get you to step outside the comfort zone, if you like, and to start thinking about how all of these things are in some way connected. Yeah.
Yeah, fascinating. Okay, let's pull up another one here. Let me know. Can you see this one?
I can, yes. Yep.
All right. This
So,
one fascinated me. I know I saw not an interview, I saw a presentation that Freddie Silva did years and years ago, and he talked
mhm.
about this one. Can you tell us a little bit about this one?
Yeah, I think this one was either at Beckhampton or Avebury Truslow, I think around 2000, maybe something like that. And obviously, to me, when I saw it, the first thing that I thought of was that it looked like iron filings with two magnets there, and then all the filings being arranged to show a magnetic field. And I think that was its nickname that summer. It was called the magnetic fields. And I know Freddie Silver did some work on it. The other fascinating thing was the date of this one, because it was the 22nd of July. And of course, 22 over 7 is pi, if you want to
Ah,
write
that's
pi
right.
as a fraction. So yeah, there was some interest. I actually went in this one and it was just incomprehensible at ground level. You had no idea what it was that you were studying. All you could see was that there were these many standing sections inside, and just being utterly blown away with it. So remind me of Freddie's presentation on this one, Matt.
Yeah, I'll do that. It's online somewhere. I think he did it years ago in California.
Hmm.
I'll send you the link.
Yeah, yeah,
Do you know
yeah.
about how big in diameter this thing is?
I'm guessing, looking at the tram or tractor lines there, that you're talking at least 200 feet in diameter. So yeah, it was pretty big.
So yeah, you're two-thirds
Yeah,
of the way of a American football field.
yeah.
That's not small.
It's
And
not small. No.
yeah, and to create this design. So let me ask you this question. You went in this one. How
Yeah.
soon after it was discovered do you think you were in it?
Probably within a week.
Within a week.
Yeah. And during that time, because late July would be the height of the season, there'd probably been many people inside it by then. But it was still beautifully laid. Most people would just walk in the band around the outside. They would be
Mhm.
quite respectful. But you can see that there's some damage there in this photo towards the
Mhm.
center there. But yeah, I mean, especially at that point where you could see that it was very fine lines and so on between each of those quite small sections there. It was very difficult to walk around to see any of the detail in it, because I'm always conscious that you leave a crop circle as you find it and you don't create any damage. And if you can't get to where you need to be without crushing or damaging, then you're not supposed to be there. So don't be there. I think it's actually quite disrespectful. But yeah, as I say, I think once you've been in one of these things, particularly something like this where it is complicated, there are lots of different parts to it. You realize just how do you even check your work if you made this at level before you left it? But it is a truly mind-blowing experience, because you do realize it does make you think, how the heck is this done? And
This one,
and in particular, yeah,
yeah. This one is wild, right? Because not
yeah,
only is this just like you're staring at this and you're just like, all right, this the kind of looks like two polar magnetic fields on opposite sides.
yeah,
If you were going to begin to make this, first of all, who even comes up with this and
yeah,
says, I'm going to go attempt to do this in the field? I don't know who would do that, right?
yeah,
Second of all, how do you execute this? And like you said, how would you even check your work? There's a lot going on here.
yeah,
And I guess my
yeah,
other question is, you went in this one and you've said this, and Gary King has said this, and Lucy Pringle has said this, that sometimes when you go in these things, you feel like a sort of fizzingness or an energetic thing. Did you have any of that when you went in this one?
I don't actually recall that, but it is right that you do. There is a feeling inside some of them, and I would imagine that this one did feel particularly energetic, just because of the nature of the pattern
Mm.
is. And I do think that something in the nature of the patterns is able to affect us. I can't remember whether we talked last time about how geometry is essentially frozen music. And just as music, human beings, we're designed to pick up on patterns in music with geometry, but music is geometry in time, then we also pick up on this stuff too. And it's why you feel the way you do when you walk in a Gothic cathedral or an ancient Egyptian temple. They're very often designed with this classical canon of geometry and number, which I think it's been known for thousands of years has the ability to affect human consciousness. This, I would imagine, I don't, it's such a long time ago now that I recall being in it, I recall being amazed by it, but I don't recall how I felt in it, apart from
Right.
obviously amazed. But yeah, I've been in many circles where that's been the case. Yeah.
Yeah, we talked about that on a few of the formations you were in our last conversation. And I highly recommend everybody go check out that first podcast I did with Karen, because we went over some of the classic formations that are just absolutely mind blowing, like the Milk Hill Spiral and the Crabwood Tree and many others, right? The Julius set. These are just
Yeah.
iconic formations that are so
Yeah.
unbelievably mind blowing. It begs the question, what the heck is going on here? And this is another one. Do you recall the lay of the crop at all?
I just recall that it was incredibly neat. I think where the two little circles that you can see that are implied in the center, the sort of the two antipodes of the the magnetic fields there was some swirling in there, and then the crop moved outwards to create the lines and the curves that you would need to draw to make this particular design. Yeah, you can tell from the photo, even though there's a little bit of damage there in the middle, probably where people have walked, that it was incredibly well made and looked beautiful on the ground. Yeah.
Let me ask you a question here because I've never been in a crop circle before. As I've been looking at this for a while now, and I'm deeply
Yeah.
fascinated by it. And I find in the beginning, I got real excited about all this. And I almost had this anxiety about me where I was like, this is so important. This is everyone needs to know this. And this is a communication from some other. And then as I've spent more time with it, I've began to relax about it a little bit. And I think it's just important that you just experience it and then you understand that there's something going on here and it just gets you thinking and it gets you interested. Did you go through that at a certain point when you started looking at this? Did you have that transition or did you automatically like what was your sort of arc in this?
I think, like lots of things, when you first come up against something that kind of really lights your fire, you get lit up, you want to know everything that you possibly can about it. I think very often arrogantly we might think we might find the answer to it, but it becomes pretty obvious pretty quickly that that's not going to happen, certainly not immediately anyway. And then I think you do settle down, and you're on the journey with it, if you like. And I think you're right. I think the most important thing in this is to realize A, that it's happening, and B, that there's a great mystery somewhere in all of this. And then I think then you just need to be humbled by it, that and just learn what you can, because I think that some of this is certainly beyond us at the moment to fully understand, and just to spend time with it in a way that is meaningful and useful to you. If what you're really I have a really great friend, Dan Vidler, who has spent years looking at the details on the ground. You really should have him on your show sometime,
We've been
because
trying to organize a time.
yeah, and because he's got some amazing photographs of some of the details inside some of the circles. And so for him, it's really important that he gets in as many as he can to document them. And for many years, Steve and I did. We've been in hundreds from the early to mid 1990s to well into the 2000s. So I don't go in anywhere near as many as I used to now, because I think I've gotten what I can from that. And now there are other things that interest me that I spend my time on. I think you do. Just think at first you do. You want to dive in as deep as you can get. And then I think eventually you settle down and maybe you find that there's something in particular about this that interests you, and then you go off and pursue that. I also think that one of the biggest things is to talk to people about it. I've had some of the best conversations I've ever had with people I've never met before in a crop circle, where we've talked about life, the universe, and everything. And you can almost see it, that change happening in people, that this gets them thinking about the idea that we might not be alone, that something important here is happening, that it might be linked to consciousness or even another intelligence. All these ideas that go round people's heads, as you do when you come face up with something that is unusual and mysterious. So I just think just by being there, the crop circles are affecting consciousness, getting people to open their minds to different possibilities, and but most of all to the idea that the world isn't just a material thing, that there is something else at work, that that human consciousness is very important, and that there's a whole side of our lives which is neglected, really, which is that side of it. You have people who are traditionally spiritual, but for a lot of people now, there's very little that they can do to that's on offer for them to advance their own consciousness. So I think this is a real wake-up call, what is going on. And maybe some of the formations are just there to get us to start thinking about that rather than the need to find an answer to it somehow.
Yeah, and that kind of leads me into something else I wanted to bring up. I spoke about this with Andy Thomas, so I know, and you guys, I think back in the 90s, did little experiments and had people draw symbols and things on pieces of paper and then meditate them. I have a formation here that I'm pretty sure is one you guys did an experiment with. I was wondering if you could take me through that real quick, because you did just bring up consciousness and
Yeah,
this
yeah.
idea that our minds are connected to that. So let me know when you can see this one here. Is this one that you guys did?
Oh, yes. So this is part of the work that was done by the Sussex Crop Circle group in the mid-90s. And the Sussex, although I don't live in Sussex, I did do a little bit of work with them that summer. I think it was over 94 and 95 that I worked with them. And they did a whole series of experiments. They actually worked with a wonderful guy who was a channeler, and he was able to go out into the landscape and do his thing where he would get in touch with the spirit of the landscape where they were working, and he was able to channel information to them about where we should set up, where we might look for. And the whole idea behind some of these experiments was to look at, could human consciousness interact with the crop circle phenomenon? And there was a reason for that. The reason for that was that almost from day one, people had been experiencing these fantastic synchronicities with the crop circles. So you would have people who would say, and my friend Dan Vidler had this, where in fact he was connected to this crop circle, but he used to cycle, and he would think, wouldn't that be a great place for a crop circle? And then next time he was cycling by, there was this crop circle. So that was very common at the beginning, right from the beginning. So it got people thinking about, was there some kind of connection here? Were whatever was behind this somehow keyed into or aware of what people were thinking about this and somehow responding to it? And I had a group up in the Midlands, and Andy had his group down in Sussex. And because we were interested in very similar things, we worked together. And I think the Sussex lot were very interested in trying to film a crop circle happening as well. And so they were looking for when, where, and how. And as I say, we did crop watches, and one at the height of this, just before this crop circle happened, we were at a place in Wiltshire, and there was a whole group of us, we'd gone up there, and Paul Bura, who was the channeler, channeled the spirit of the landscape up there, and it was an incredibly powerful thing. Paul was the first time that I had ever come across a channeler. I'd never worked or seen one in action, and he was a remarkable man, and he gave this amazing channeling. And if you're ever in touch with Andy again, you should get him to share the video of it, because it was incredible. And what he said at the end of it was that we shouldn't worry about filming it, because even if we did, nobody would believe it.
Right.
And that it, in a sense, the connection between us and the phenomenon itself was in of itself the whole point of it, and that your personal connection and your personal growth, and then the sharing of that with others, was the whole point of this.
Mm,
And to look for proof or a way to convert other people into seeing that, it would never work. It was not what was on offer here, if you like. What was
mm,
on offer was that personal connection for anybody who wanted it, anybody who took the time. It's a little bit like the CE5 thing in the UFO community, where it's that effort to, as James Iandoli would say, to engage the phenomenon, that's what's on offer, that personal interaction. And that begins with synchronicity, that is the clue in. And once those start to happen, if you follow those and you follow the people that you meet and so on, and that there is on offer this personal connection. So this crop circle, the Sussex group felt this crop circle was in response to the things that they had been doing. There's a fantastic book Andy and Paul Bura wrote about it. It's called
mhm.
Quest for Contact.
I've
And
got it.
yeah, you can still get copies of it, secondhand copies. And if you're really into the consciousness connection, then it's a really fantastic read. And then also there's my own little book about Charlie Knoll, which is the experiments that I did with my group up in the Midlands, which was did very similar things. We didn't work with a channeler, but we certainly had a group. We meditated, and we felt that we had a formation that was in response to that.
What's the name of
And
that book?
it's called Charlie Knoll, an archetypal crop circle story. Charlie
Okay.
Knoll is the place where the crop circle happened.
Okay.
And I wrote it all down. I wanted to write down as well the reasoning and the thinking behind it, some of the meditative techniques that we use, because I think if you're interested in that, you should get out there and pursue it. Because I think this idea that the crop circles opened up in my life, that there was something going on that was beyond just human consciousness, and that you could have a connection with it, was the thing that changed my life. And it changed my whole ontological view of everything. And but I think very often it's it's the personal, that you have to have the experience for yourself. That's what changes you. You can't have the experience secondhand. Through somebody else's experience can inspire you to have your own, but that's what's on offer. And I think, I hope that the books that I've written and so on, that there's enough there to get people out there and working with this themselves.
I just had a crazy thought, and I may cut this out of the podcast, but let me ask you this question. Let me start by this. Do you know how, like in nature, things have an ecological balance? Like nature finds a way to balance itself out, right?
Yep.
So maybe in some strange way that like our minds and our consciousness is finding a way to balance things out, because I don't think anybody would argue this, that most of human civilization right now is quite linearly thinking, right? We have this sort of way of thinking where it's all materialistic. And because that thinking dominates, maybe there's some sort of balance that's happening out here. And these phenomenon that we're seeing and we're perceiving, like the crop circle, is helping to balance out that way of thinking. Have you ever had that thought? Has anyone ever?
Oh, yes. And yeah, and I think there's something to it as well. Nature does find a way very often. And there is, you're quite right, there is an imbalance. I think we've gone down a very materialistic route. And don't get me wrong, I think that it's been necessary for human evolution to develop science to understand the world in that way. But I think in doing that, I think we've gone too far. And now we don't see that anything is connected with like an object and subject. It's very strange, this relationship we have, to where we don't think we're part of nature anymore, and we absolutely are. And I also think when you have a deep connection to nature, you develop an empathy for it, which I don't think we have at the moment. We're very in distancing ourselves. We see the world around us as it's a tool for use, or just resources to be used up in whatever way that we think we need or want. And we have no empathy for, particularly for nature, I think, and increasingly for one another, which is incredibly sad. And I think what phenomena like this do is make that connection very plain, that it is there, that we are part and parcel of nature, that we are a product of it. We cannot exist without it. And so I think the idea of, you see it a lot in the UFO world, don't you, where very often contactees will talk about how the messages that they are given are about the ecology of the world, and about, I think one of the children in the Rua Zimbabwe case said that she was told we were becoming too technologed, she said.
Her
And
words.
I
Yeah.
think that's very true. And because when you become distant like that, like you become distant with people, you lose empathy, because you can't relate to them in a personal way anymore. I think if we were much more connected with the world, I think beauty does it as well. Plato talked about truth and beauty and all of that. And I think that echoes the same thing. I think that's why the crop circles employ beauty, because we're very attracted to it, but also because it makes us feel a certain way about the world and the countryside. Often talked about how very often when people come in contact with the crop circles for the first time, that it's like falling in love. And it is like that. This becomes a precious thing to you in your life, something that you feel intimately connected to. And I think that's exactly the way you're supposed to feel about it. I think that's the way it's designed, that it produces this empathy to make us care more deeply about what's going on in the world and with each other.
Yeah, that's a beautiful sentiment. And I think if there is some sort of balance going on, there, it certainly seems like there's a slight nudging of pay attention to this. And I also find it interesting that if there would to be a phenomenon such as that, that they would put it in nature, that they would put it in food, because that has anybody that's studied this knows that there's multiple layers to whatever's going on here
Yes.
in the geometry and in the positioning of them and the alignments of them, and then what the explicit design. And so another layer to that would be, why would they choose crops? It's food, it is in nature, and so it's meant to get your attention in that way. You can do land art anywhere. You can mow
Yeah.
down shrubbery, you can do anything, but it's very interesting that it would be specific to this.